seeds from which America has grown. Let them say of me, I was one who believed in shame.
Hello everyone, welcome in. My name is Mr. America, the Bearded Truth. Let me know if you guys are having any issues. Having a little bit of technical difficulties tonight. But we're going to persist. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep pushing through. Because that's what we do around here, right? So if you guys have never been around here before, if you've never seen me before, you've never been in this show before, I am Mr. America, the Bearded Truth, Jason Lyon, your neighborhood-friendly libertarian, coming to bring you the objectivity, to bring you what empowers the individual, and to bring the truth about all these topics that are so near and dear to what makes us a great country. Whether we agree with each other or not is not always the most importance. What is important is civility, and certainly I want to talk about the discussion and the events of yesterday. So yesterday was who are you? Yesterday was an event called was an event that was put on, and it's called Drag Queen Story Hour. And what this event is an event that started back in 2015 was the first time this actually happened. And what they do is it's a group that's all about trying to bring drag queens out to read books to young children. And this has been taken wildly differently from both sides of the aisle on this. You have advocates for it and you have advocates against this. Understanding that people are going to disagree is, of course, politics, is, of course, the social issues, is, of course, a lot of things. But it's important. It's very important that we talk about things as things change in our world, as the world grows, as new ideas are formed, to actually be able to come through and discuss these, right? So we are going to go through this entire event from yesterday. I actually was very fortunate and very thankful that I got to speak to both sides, to two of the organizers, two organizers on these sides creating the event. That was both Morgan Williams and Riley Hunty. Morgan was the one to set it up, and I butcher the name every time. I apologize for this. Mom's Liberal Happy Hour for South Carolina. There we go. I checked the notes, and so we could be good on that. And so that's where Morgan Williams comes from. Riley Hunty is one of the drag queens that was reading. And I also got to reach out to, on the opposing side, the protest organizers that was formed by Taylor Cox as well as Presley Stutz. So I got to talk to both of them. Got to sit down and have a nice little interview to be able to understand what their purpose was, what their issues were, and to be able to figure out how to take two wildly opposing discussions, wildly opposing views, and be able to take those and find the unity, find where we can find the cohesiveness, and to really bring back community, right? And so let's go through this the timeline of yesterday. So this was an event that was scheduled between 2 to 5 p.m. down at Five Forks Public Library. Public is, of course, important on this. And so I showed up with my wife. We showed up a little before 1. We wanted to see the whole thing go down. We wanted to see and talk with as many people as we could to get a good fundamental understanding of what people were saying. I didn't get to spend a lot of time learning from people before the event or outside of the event. It was effectively what you see in the media. It's effectively what you saw in a lot of things. And it was just basically that people were talking past each other. Nobody was talking to each other. So the protesters, those that were advocating against the event, a lot of them were using Christian views or Catholic views, Protestant views, in order to effectively lay damn onto others. and you had the advocates for it just saying, look, you don't know what love is, you don't know what this is, this, that, and the other. And there was a huge breakthrough on the communication there, right? Because neither one was talking to the other. They were just merely talking past each other. And of course, whenever you have an argument like that, whenever you have conversations dive down in that way, nothing grows from that. I did hear of a couple cherry-picked arguments or discussions that were conducive. People were talking to each other, and it was beneficial for them. And I know that even one of the Spartanburg Libertarian chair was saying that somebody that was against the view, against the event and everything else, had some really good talking points, had some good discussions, and because of that, he was interested in reaching out. Those are the things that I really wanted to focus on. Those were beautiful. Those were helpful, because people need to have those. And so on the outside, it was raining, it was cold, it was in South Carolina, so it was like 50, 40 degrees, and people were freezing, like everyone should be in their winter clothes. But nonetheless, people were out there, and they were practicing their First Amendment. They were practicing using their voices and exercising their freedom in order to speak for or against. I thought that was absolutely beautiful. There was only one small scuffle at the end. But so throughout the day, beautiful time. Glad I could have been there and experienced that. Going into the event, I knew that there was a lot of specific incidents and specific actions that were unbecoming of the person or persons that were involved with that. And that was one thing that I really wanted to get into, was to make sure that during this time of growth, whether it was individual growth or growth as a community or a staunch defense of what their stances were, what we could do at the end of this was to be able to actually stand there and say, to self-reflect, to look out onto what they had done, and to see if they could have bettered themselves in some way. Because I think that on both sides of this discussion, there were people that wanted to conflate other issues. They wanted to say, well, some of these people are Christian, and so therefore it's all Christians. My wife, who is a very firm and she's a Christian, and she loves her God. She loves God, and she loves that life. She was feeling very uneasy with some of the arguments that people were making. There has to be some cohesiveness. We have to actually talk about the issue at hand if that's what people want to do. And that was certainly a big issue that I saw, was that people didn't want to talk about this. This event that was happening, this event that was the drag queen story hour, was just a movement. This is coming from both of the organizers, from both Riley and Morgan, who I spoke to, and they both, in separate interviews, said that the entire purpose of Drag Queen Story Hour is to make it to where society is more accepting of people who are differing. Make it to where you don't look at somebody and say, look, you don't dress the same, you don't act the same, you don't think the same, and so therefore you're wrong, you're immoral, and should be taken out. This was a way of opening the arms and the hearts of others in order to be more accepting. If you disagree with the way that was being exercised, that is well within your rights to argue against it, and I applaud those that were able to do that. But the entire purpose was to do that. It wasn't the purpose to push the progressive agenda. It wasn't the purpose to support NAMLA, which was denounced in quite serious terms by both Riley and Morgan. I had to ask the probing questions. I had to ask the hard questions. And that was something that they both denounced. They said, no, we are in no way looking to groom the children. We are in no way looking to make it easier for predators or for anything else. And there's actually statistics that some of the advocates were pointing out. And while I don't want to get into a religious hate scope, I don't want to get into a damn the religious. They pointed out that you're more likely to be victimized as a child through religion, through the church, than you would be from a drag queen. And so there is that. There is that notion, and I don't necessarily think that we should be damning the church. We should be damning anyone. We should be working towards protecting the children, to be providing a better platform for the children in the long run. I'm not saying I agree with the drag queen story hour. I'm not saying I disagree with the drag queen story hour. I enjoyed it. I sat through one of the shows, through the entire story time. I got to listen to everything. And I was there to start dialogue and change minds on both sides. Isak, thank you so much for doing that. That's beautiful. That's kind of what I was doing. I was starting the conversation and letting people run with it as they may. I see I have some video cutting in and out. I apologize for that, guys. We are getting a brand new toaster for me as soon as we get the interest-free government loan back from the government. So there has to be a drive to actually converse with people and to help understand the other side. And that leads me into my next point, that what we saw was, because there was a lack of communication leading up to this entire event, leading up to everything, there were key points that were being taken by both sides. When you look at what Taylor Cox and his opposition to this, his main premise was not one of a religious stand. It was one of, there was a Christian group that would have been denied. Absolutely, Charles. Oh, Chuck, welcome in, man. There was Taylor Cox. One of his premises was the fact that there was a Christian group that would have been denied the access to a public library to be able to hold an event in which they were going to be dressing up as characters and using and reading from the Chronicles of Narnia. And so, because they were denied, he felt as if it was wrong for somebody else in which he disagreed with should be able to utilize the platform in their way. And so, in his way, in his view, he thinks that because one person, and I'm sorry, Taylor, if you're listening to this, but I think that this is the way that I could formulate it to where people can understand. Because one group was wronged, another group can be wronged just as much. And certainly I think that while I may not be the biggest Christian person out there, while I may not speak for Christianity, I want to see more push for that. I want to see more people actually coming out there and advocating for that. I would hope that the advocates for this event from yesterday, from the Drag Queen Story Hour, that they too would stand up and say, yes, you need to push and accept for the Christian groups to do this, and accept for liberty for all, for the free exercise of speech and teachings in these public libraries, which are common grounds, which is, we shouldn't be limiting those of which we disagree on what they can say on these. What is wrong with just having a story hour? I don't think there's anything wrong, but there's a purpose behind it, and and so I hope that we can see Christian groups from this actually go out and push. If they get denied, I want that to be publicized. If anyone finds a Christian group that is being denied a platform on a public ground, that needs to make airwaves. We need to be opening up the speech for all groups, regardless on if we agree with them or not, because it is not up to you on how somebody else gets to express their speech. I think at the end of the day, and so his entire premise, Taylor Cox's premise, was never brought up or was never heard by both Morgan and Riley. So when I had asked them about that, they both had no clue whatsoever about this. And so that was that's a big premise right there. That's a big part of his stance was that, and it was never heard. And so with understanding Taylor Cox's opposition, he does have some merit there in some regards, right? because the state shouldn't be able to pick and choose who is allowed to and who is not. And if you go after one group, you kind of make it to where everyone is susceptible to that same thing. But so that was missed on Taylor's side. When it comes to the Morgan and Riley stance, there was the stance of that they were just opposing. They were opposing bullying. They were opposing vilifying. They were opposing ostracizing children, young adults, or whoever it is for being different. While yes, they were waving the LGBT flag while having drag queens, which from my understanding, while the drag queens may be accepted into the LGBT community because they don't have a letter, it's kind of like being accepted into the alliance, if you will. So they weren't direct representatives. I guess that's the way that this works. It's not to vilify. It may just be my own ignorance. Let me just be honest with that. But their thing was not to make it more unsafe for children. I had asked them specifically. I asked another probing question. Have you ever worked for, or allowed for an accomplice or a fellow worker who has been guilty of committing crimes against children or sexual misconduct in any way? And the answers, the responses from both of them was absolutely not. It was such an intolerable thing. And so this is it. That was a message that was not being heard, and we can get into the further down discussions and the further down arguments within that we saw from a lot of people. But when you miss those two big points, when you miss those two big connection points or disconnects that were happening from both sides, I think that it certainly shows that there is a great lack of communication in our country. How are we to be a community if we can't speak to one another? How are we to grow together if we just stay segregated, if we stay separated? It is that very notion that has led us to the division that we're at here in 2019. And so it's my call to action to everyone. It is my call to everyone to not just vilify those who you may disagree with or those who you do disagree with, but to actually sit down and try to better yourself to be able to have a conversation with others, because you have no control over the others, right? You have no control over that conservative, over that libertarian, over that progressive, over that advocate, over that activist, whoever it is, whoever your opposition at that very moment is. You have no control over them, but you have plenty of control over yourself. Right, and I think that everyone that I'd interviewed would be honest in saying that I never once disagreed with any of them. I agreed with everybody. There is always a core premise in which we all agree with, right? Between Presley, between Taylor, between Morgan, and between Riley, what they all advocated for was for the safety of the children. What they all advocated for was to make sure that our future was brighter, to make sure that we were holding on to good values and to growing together and to be accepting. That is one thing that was clear, that was absolutely crystal clear between all four individuals, despite the fact that they had so many differences. So if we can grab onto that common ground and be able to work together, we can really figure out and really bring the better idea out. And bringing those better ideas out doesn't just better the individuals being involved, but it's bettering the individuals that are affected. And so this has always been the libertarian idea. This has always been the conservative idea, the liberal idea, the progressive idea, to bring people together. That we want to grow people in our own image. it doesn't take it in our own image, because sometimes, let's be honest, regardless of what side you're on, regardless of how heartfelt you are about your and how passionate you are about your stance, sometimes your stance may not be the best. I can admit that. I know plenty of people out there that would be willing to admit that. Maybe not on record, maybe not on in public, but understanding that we are all fallible. I feel strongly both ways. I love that. But understanding that we all want the same. We can work together to actually achieve that, instead of having the visceral hatred that we have right now. So, continuing on, everything is screwing up on me tonight, guys. I apologize. So, during the event, let's go through the event. Because I think we got most of the lead up there. Actually, we just went on a positive note. Let's go on to something that I'm upset about, but at the same time I'm thankful for. What I saw in the weeks leading up, in the time leading up to this event, we saw a lot of disgusting behavior on both sides. We had seen ratings for public events. That's a good idea. What we saw from some individuals was threatening of cell phone accounts. We had seen postings of personal resumes. We had seen absolute excoriation and vilification of people's characters, of their motives, and everything else. Welcome in, Cyrus. We had seen a lot of tearing people down at their personal level. We had seen personal addresses being posted. We had seen jobs and employment areas being posted and being brought up. There was just absolute recklessness. And I was thankful that when doing these interviews, when actually asking people, I was pretty direct on some of the events, and I said, "Is this something that you think was acceptable? Is this something that you find that you should be repeated?" And I was glad to see that the hindsight was still 2020. We're still holding up on that, and so people were like, you could see that they. Yeah, that was wrong. That was bad. Whether it was them or others within their movement, this was important. That self-reflection, that understanding, I did wrong, or I accepted wrong, or I didn't denounce the wrong in the past. Now, I do know that when it came to one individual on the advocate for side, that she was banned from the page and kicked off and basically denounced entirely because of her actions, and that's the right decision. And I think that one was pretty prompt. But it's things like that are so important, that we hold our own side accountable. We know that we don't see the politicians doing it, right? The Republicans blame the Democrats for everything. Democrats protect the Democrats. Democrats blame the Republicans for everything. Republicans defend the Republicans. There is no self-accountability. There is no party accountability. There's just no accountability in politics. But if we can restore that on our social side, if we can restore that to us, certainly we're going to make society a lot better, and we make the culture better. And when the culture becomes better, politics is downstream of culture. So eventually, maybe one day, we can have a decent political sphere as well. Back to a positive note. So yes, there have been people that have been mentioning these sheriffs. So we had the sheriffs there, we had the highwaymen, we had the city police, we had the FBI even, that were there. They had set up a beautiful, well, I wouldn't say beautiful. They set up walls. They set up a nice barrier in accordance with how they normally handle protest and counter protest. But the way that they had structured this, and this is coming from Alex Peterson, the Spartanburg Libertarian chair, was that the way that they had structured it and the way that they had set it up. So when you had left the library, when you had walked out of the library and you're ready to leave, and you could see the sea of people that were waiting to come in, the wait time could have been up to 3 hours for some people. When you had left, you first walked past the protesters, and then you were across the counter protesters. That was something that, by the way that was structured, it was beneficial for the people leaving, because you were going from a low note to a high note, because there were some people that were out there being quite angry. And there's, again, I want to point on the fact that they were espousing their views, they were espousing what they wanted and what they believed in, and it's not wrong of them to do so. But it did make people uncomfortable, because I think that we, as a society, as an entire group, when you are having somebody else's opinion that differs with your own, you become very uneasy. You become physically unwell, and that certainly did affect some people. Other people were able to hold their heads up high, but just having that little bit of relief at the end, the libertarian chair said that looked as if it was a relief for some people. And so but nonetheless, the police force did a great job on keeping people segregated, keeping people in line and doing the right things. We only had one altercation yesterday. I guess 2 individuals from the Advocates for side had jumped over the barriers, and so I think, some denouncing there is certainly worthy. Keep it to the words, not to the fists. But great time nonetheless. Going into the event itself. So going in, the library is government funded, very nice place. It was well organized and everything else. The staff was kind of shaken up a little bit. And so when you went into the event, they had a nice little area in which people could go into. There was an area for kids to sit down. There was a couple chairs, not enough for everyone, so there was some standing ground. And when they had started, they had read some very gentle books, nothing radical. There was no like baby feminist book, which, if you guys have never seen baby feminist book, I'm sorry. If you're a feminist, I apologize, but that book is a bunch of crock, because effectively there's no difference between feminist baby and a regular baby, but somehow you gotta be proud because it's a baby that says that it's a feminist. I guess it would be more in line with the first wave feminism or the second wave feminism. I don't see it in line with the third or fourth wave. But that's a whole other discussion for another night. But they read books like My Wish for You from Riley Hunty read that one. Princess Mocha wrote Oh, the Places You'll Go from Dr. Seuss. Cheetah Kane Morgan read What a Truly Cool World. And Gigi wrote Love You Forever. So these were not books that were controversial. These were not books that were excoriating men or pushing a progressive agenda or anything else. These were just normal books. And oh, it's the newest library branch. Oh wow, I did not know that. And so they weren't pushing controversial ideas, but there was a controversy that came up. Now, being in a public area, in accordance with the Patriot Act. Yeah, I agree with you, babe. In accordance with the Patriot Act, in accordance with basic fundamental understanding of how public places work, there is a level in which recordings are acceptable. And so it created a controversy when... Let me just put it out bluntly. There were many people within this room. I went to the first story reading, and then I was doing interviews afterwards. There were many people recording. There was no verification on who had children, who did not have children. The basic assumption was that everyone was recording their children, listening to Story Hour, with the exception of Presley Stutz. Presley Stutz was recording. He was performing a live stream on Facebook and allowing people to come in. How many people were actually there? Attendees. So they had read to over 500 people within. The protesters and counter protesters, I'm not sure on the specifics on that. It did look as if the protesters did outweigh the counter protest, or the counter protesters did outweigh the protesters by a decent margin. So Presley Stutz was recording, live streaming the event. He had many views on it, and he wasn't posting anything controversial during this. I had actually tuned into this in between interviews, and he wasn't saying anything. He wasn't doing anything other than streaming this out for the public. And it came to a point where one of the mothers had asked, or had made the announcement, around 75 protesters, around 200 on the other side. Okay, thank you, Michael Peterson. When it came to the when she brought it up to the staff's attention, somebody came up and said, "Look, no one is allowed to record anymore." Presley Stutz put down his phone, and everyone else put down their phone. Everyone complied. There was no issues there. Since then, there's been a potential push for a lawsuit on this. I don't know how that suit is going through. I know that Presley Stutz has taken down the video himself from his personal Facebook page. But it really does get into the question of what are we allowed to do as a society on public grounds? Are we allowed to record? Because we're allowed to record on public grounds. South Carolina is a single consent state. So if you want to record and you are within it, you can be that singular person. And so it does raise the question. Now, the concern against it, of course, was that there was children that were in this video, and so it's the privacy of the children and the sanctity of that. And so I understand both sides of this argument. I understand both sides of this discussion. I think that the way that some people went about this, and they wanted to go after. They wanted to go after Presley Stutz and call him a pedophile for this. And I think what's being missed by everybody was that this was supposed to be an event to raise awareness, to bring together the community. And certainly the comments from a lot of people on his video were not acceptable. They were demeaning. But the idea at the core of this was to get the awareness out there. And so if you don't like the messenger but you still like the message, you get into this weird conflict. You get into a weird sticky situation. I think that's something that we as a society, we need to come through and figure this out. I know that some of the organizers were upset about that specific incident and that specific event, and I think that more discussions need to occur there. And I would be greatly interested in if I could help out or be involved in any way. When dealing with immorality issues, that goes straight to God's law. It's interesting. Okay, real question. Should this not be an issue? Quite as simple as don't like it, don't go. It's not like people are being forced to go to this. I'm not even sure. Okay, so at the premise, at the core of this, yes, it was supposed to be an event in which you can voluntarily go. If you don't want to go, you voluntarily don't have to go. That was the entire discussion on the advocate side. And the opposing side said, look, we're trying to do this in order to protect the children, protect this, and protect everything else. Yes, I do have a wife. And so, I mean, both sides. Here's all right, I'm not going to get into that right now. But yes, you voluntarily could go. People had made the point that their tax dollars were being utilized in order to pay for this, to pay for the library, and therefore they should have a say in what's allowed and what's not allowed. I believe there was 12,000 signatures on a petition in order to prevent this or to prohibit this type of an event from occurring. I, for one, I don't have to agree with something in order to say I agree with allowing it to happen. And so I am not taking the stance I am in favor or against the drag queen story hour. I am trying to stay as Switzerland as possible on this. But let me see here. Let me go through this real quick. So there was a couple issues that I had seen, and certainly from the libertarian group. Starting to get a bit out of frame. Thank you. I apologize. I do that a lot, actually. It's something I really do need to work on. One thing that I did want to bring up there was one libertarian that had brought a sign and I actually pointed it out, and it was an attempt by quote unquote conservatives to use legislation in order to prohibit this. And I had actually reached out to House Representative Gary Smith, who spoke with me. I was very thankful that he would speak with me on this matter. But he was talking about the ways that this was being structured and the ways that this was being pushed through. Where do I have that note? There it is. And so effectively what they were looking at doing is, because there was an age appropriate for children in school to learn things, right? So for sex ed, you can't learn until you're age 12 or in 6th grade. They're looking to also implement that for the public library. Consistency is key. That's always been my big thing. Consistency is key. But I think that certainly it also becomes a much more nuanced argument than just saying, look, because somebody is I'm going to speak scientifically, so I apologize if I'm triggering or bothering anybody with this. When a man dresses up as a woman or a woman dresses up as a man, specifically for drag, it's a man dressing up as a woman, and is wanting to read to children, that is not inherently a sexual activity. Yes, Taylor. I had mentioned that, I believe, before you were in here, and that was one big point that I had made earlier. Two big discussion points on both sides that were missed, and that was a huge tragedy in the grand scheme of things. But when you talk about this, right, a drag queen is not inherently sexual. Because sexual would be intercourse. Sexual would be talking about gay, lesbian, bi. Those things would be sexual in nature, right? Because that's actually just talking about somebody's sexuality. When it comes to actual drag, that would be a way of displaying gender. And certainly we can have the nuanced discussion on what gender is and how it's structured. If it is I disagree with the notion that gender is a social construct. Gender roles are a social construct, but the way that you portray yourself isn't inherently tied to your gender, because I believe that gender is much more biological than what a lot of people would believe in. But when it comes to this, I don't think that this is inherently sexual, and so understanding the legislation and the way that it's being looked at from Mr. Gary Smith, I would question how this would be applicable, and so I'd be interested. Let's protest evil government, not free individuals. Ooh, Isak, yes, yes. We should be protesting. Could we all just get together and protest the atrocities that is government? Because they are infringing upon us way too much. Let me see here. So, when I was speaking with Riley and with Morgan, I wanna go back to them a little bit. And certainly, right, you don't have to agree with the liberal message. You don't have to agree with the progressive message. But one thing that they were focusing on, and I want to recap this because I think it's really important to talk about the premise of both sides, and we'll go over the missed topics once again, and then we'll continue on. But the premise was tolerance, was acceptance of be who you wanted to be, and we'll make it and be who you are. Don't be ashamed of it, and to accept people that are different than you, or to accept people that espouse themselves different, and that should be okay. That should be accepted by all. I know that Taylor Cox was saying, I have no issue with that. He was saying specifically, he was talking about having as he had said just above, that the that the Christian group was denied, and so therefore we're talking about the equality of silencing from the government effectively. And even from Presley Stutz, his very opening line during our interview, he said, "I want to make it absolutely 100% clear that I love all these people. I don't hate gay people. I don't hate lesbians. I don't hate transgenders. I don't hate drags. I don't hate anybody. I don't hate them. There's nothing that I hate." And he wanted to make that clear. I think that's really true at the basis of all people. There are people that hate, to use it from a religious standpoint. They don't hate the sinner, they hate the sin. And oftentimes it's easier to take that and say, no, they're going to hate the sinner. And so when you hate the sinner, it makes it easier to be combative and to go after the others. And that's where the start for some people is. I think that we need to speak plainly, but with clarity, and that's certainly something that I'm missing out on when I've been talking to a lot of people. I'm not speaking about during the interviews right now. When I talk to a lot of people, they just accept these overbearing comments, and they build up. They almost exaggerate the attacks from the other side in order to bolster their own ability to be more aggressive and to be more vitriolic against the others. And so here's another call to action, right? When you're seeing this, right? I got called a dirty bootlicker on one of the comments, and I said, no, I want you to come in. I want you to see if I'm misrepresenting you, if I'm misrepresenting your stance or anything else, because clarity is important, honesty is important, and having these discussions are very important. You can call me whatever name you want in the book. I'm here to try to make the world a little bit of a better place. If you're okay with that, if you disagree with me, you can disagree with me civilly, or you can effectively be a bully on your own terms. Unfortunately, we're not as free as we think, and division is a requirement by evil government. Absolutely, because a divided nation is a nation that can be controlled. Because we oftentimes, here's the great part about slavery. When you have an entire society that is enslaved, and you have two different groups of slaves, and you say, well, I want to punish those other slaves, and that's going to make me happier, or I'm going to take from these slaves in order to make my life a little bit better. Was speaking about regulations or taxation and everything else. Eventually, that comes back onto you as well. And so, what we're doing is we're just effectively tightening the shackles on ourselves, and we need to make it much better. Make each other more free, right? Challenge the other side. Be like, I'm going to make you more free than you can make me. But I'm going to challenge you to be as liberty-minded as you can be. And I bet you can't make me. Bet you can't make me as free as I can make you. World would be a better place. The country would be a much better place. I promise you that. Here's a good comment. The Constitution doesn't cover immorality. This is when immoral people have a responsibility to step in with the ultimate law of God, as with abortion, which legal by men but not by God. God laws trump. So that comes from a secular point of view, or not a secular, a religious point of view. And here's another big. And I don't want to point you out. I don't want to, denounce your point of view, or undermine it. But I think that whenever you have a religious argument, whenever you have that, you are missing out on a great deal of people, right? Whether you think secular people or atheist or agnostic or whoever it is, if they don't believe in the same values that you do, you never get that connection. You never get that understanding from the other side. They just say it doesn't affect me because I don't believe. And so I think that as a society, we got to work on making better arguments. if you're arguing against a secular person, the best argument you can have is a secular argument. If you're arguing against a religious person and that's their beliefs, the best way to have that is to utilize a religious argument. Absolutely, right? Does allowing anyone to say or do what they want in the name of free speech something that will unite a community? It can. So, with our founding fathers, when they wrote the First Amendment, and the basis behind freedom of speech was the idea that bad ideas can be squashed with better ideas. Not that you silence bad ideas, not that you go after bad ideas. And so, when you have, let's use a couple of examples. If we have KKK, and we know that the KKK does exist in a small fraction of this country. There are active KKK members in this country right now. If they come out and publicly speak, do you think that the entire nation as a whole will come out and actually denounce them? I believe that they would. If they can keep it away from the partisanness, if they can keep it away from being a Democrat or a Republican, but if they can come out and espouse their white supremacy and actual white supremacy, I think that you would see the country unite on battling that. So I really do think that freedom of speech inherently will be able to open up the lines of communication and also help unite the community. You're not speaking truth if you don't think drag isn't sexual. That is naive. I mean, no disrespect. That's fine. That is your opinion, and that's okay. I fail to see how somebody dressing up in a different way is inherently sexual. You should have a right to choose the information your child does or does not consume. I completely agree with you, Michael Peterson. That's why I'm all in favor of school choice. I'm in favor of being able to help make it easier for parents to be able to choose the schools that their children go to teach their children the morals and the values that they believe in, and to be able to have that freedom of choice. I completely 100% agree with you. This is a protesting against government in a way. I'm all in favor of protesting the government. If you find me in favor of the government, you guys all have the permission to slap me. That's fine. Conservatives are moving towards homeschooling their kids to keep them away from public schools. It's a good idea. Yet they still have to pay school taxes. Should the choice to homeschool come with extra cost? It should not. And in fact, Taylor Cox, if you go and listen to Jeff Davis and Olga, they're pushing out a bill that is a more private school choice, to where you would be receiving 80% of the school funding that your child would have received or would have followed your child if they went to school. You'd actually be receiving 80% of that to yourself in order to help fund the homeschooling for your child. And so I think that's right. Yeah, ESAC's on top of that. And so I think that I also want to point out, this was the first event here in Greenville area, the greater Greenville area, or the upstate, in which a large protest and a large advocacy group had grown and actually come together and actually had opposed each other on this. There were specifically six prior drag queen story hours that have occurred in the past couple of years. Now remember, the drag queen story hour started in 2015. It's a brand new idea, and so you're going to have a lot of opposition. Anytime you have a new idea, there's always going to be opposition, and that's okay. But we had 1 in the Greenville County and 5 in Spartanburg, and so that once again is coming from the well-researched. As much hate as libertarians get, it's amazing that how many of them are so well researched, how so involved into the social issues going on in this country or in their area, that Alex Peterson once again coming through, knocking it out of the park with some more knowledge and making sure that I verify this stuff before I come out here and do this. But it's good, right? It's interesting that this was the event. And so certainly I think that when I was discussing with Morgan, and I believe it was brought up with Taylor as well, I may be misquoting on this part, but I know when I spoke with Morgan, that the opposition actually helped build up the support, actually built up the publicity. And so Taylor was very gracious, and he had actually congratulated Morgan after the event. Said, it was a nice peaceful event. I'm glad that everything went smoothly, and he was very gracious. And so that's what we need. That's what we need more of is more Taylors and Morgans having a absolute polar opposite of an opinion, but at the end of the day, still being able to shake hands and say, yes, we're fellow Americans, and we still care about each other, and we still want the best for all. I know I'd seen from Presley Stutz, I'd seen from Taylor Cox, I'd seen from Morgan, I'd seen from Riley, and I'd seen from even some of the other organizers. They were calling for love. They were calling for support. They were calling for compassion, and that is what is actually at the core of all of these discussions is love. We love one another, and how we show it is different, and how we accept it is different, and everything else. But at the end of the day, we got to figure out how to love one another, and maybe I'm tying into my liberal roots too much, but coexisting, I think, is not necessarily a bad thing, because as long as we don't use the state, we can do a lot of great things together. Because I know that even. There is an organization. It was the Atheist Homeless. Atheist Homeless Period Project, and you would think, oh no, it's atheist. They're trying to preach atheism or whatever else, but no, they came in. They would provide for women, for hygiene products and everything else, and just helping out the homeless. And I thought that was a great idea. And so we all want to help and be compassionate and to reach out to our communities, whether it's through your church or through direct or going through a third party, whatever it is. We need to work together and keep growing this. It's beautiful. It's the best thing that we can do. And I'm going to go ahead and open up the phone lines for you guys. If you guys want to call in, you guys are more than welcome to. The phone number is 802-671-5328. Oh no, scam likely. All right. But you guys are more than welcome to call in. If you guys got something you would like to say, you're more than free to call in. Again, that number is 802-671-5328. We're going to be going live for probably another 10-15 minutes. But I want to know what was your big take on this? Do you think that I don't want to get into the specifics, right? I want to keep it kind of on the outskirts, on the 3,000-foot view, if you will. How do we take this event? Because we know that the event's going to occur again. We know it's going to come back. We know that the push is not only here in Greenville County, but it's also nationwide. These things are happening in California. They're happening in New York. They're happening in generally progressive areas, but they're going to be growing in conservative states as well. And so what can we do to make them better? Right? Because we don't have to agree, and certainly that's true. But what can we do if you oppose? What can you do to help organize this to be better? How can you organize it to show love and support, but also while helping direct people to better ideas? Is there a better idea out there? What can you do to put or to push people in lieu of that idea? Because I'm a free market idea guy, right? If there's an idea out there and I don't like the idea, I think it's incumbent upon that person to say, I don't like it. Here's another idea. Here's a couple more ideas. And that's how we get better ideas, right? And so if you're opposed to it, yeah, absolutely. If you are in favor of this, if you're in favor of the Drag Queen Story Hour, what do you think that you could do in order to help bring people to accept it, right? What can you do to better your side? That's really what I want to hear, because we know what the instance was. We know what the opposition and everything else. We're going to Tamara Shander. I didn't see that guy. I did not see that guy at all. Hold on, I got a message. Oh yeah, sweet. So it's what can we do as a society to make this better? Because I know that this was this was a really heated thing, and I know that there was a lot of angst, a lot of anxiety, a lot of nervousness, and a little bit of scariness on the Tea Party end, which he got to speak instead of Michael Burns. Mark Burns, you mean? I heard there was a guy in the corner. Michael Peterson. You might. So, if you know about that guy, so there was an individual specifically, and I wasn't sure if I was going to bring this up, but the Libertarian chair was also talking about a guy talking very fondly of a man who was speaking against it, and he was looking for that. So if you guys, anarcho-capitalists, I love it. If anyone is able to find out who this individual was, that individual, many people want to have a discussion, want to buy him a beer and sit down and explore each other's minds, because that right there is the purpose of the First Amendment. I may not agree with you right now. I may agree with you later. Let's have this. Let's explore each other. What's the purpose of having a brain if you're not going to share it with others? And yes, that was something that when I heard about that, I was floored. I loved it. That's what we needed. I love the ANCAP. You're a rare breed, my friend. Thank you for coming in. For those of you guys who don't know what kind of a libertarian I am, I know that is oftentimes lost in the nuance of what libertarians are. I am a minimalist minarchist, leaning towards the anarchy, but that doesn't mean you need to hate me. That doesn't mean you need to think I'm some kind of a radical. I just believe that we can be better than the government ever could be. I would leave a judicial system. I would restructure our judicial system, but I would leave effectively that. But yes. So with that, I think I'm pretty much through most of my notes. I had an amazing time. Let me just say that. I had an amazing time, because I'm not somebody that finds happiness in things, or finds happiness and going to certain places. But seeing people having to we're going on 2 years, Zook. Having people that differ, and seeing people logically and intelligently discuss things, or being able to espouse their views, and oftentimes very different than my own. That's what excites me. I'm weird. I understand that. I come from a different tree. But it was so beautiful to have that. And while I don't like how many tragedies had to occur on the way to getting here, but it was worth it for me at the end of the day to see. I saw a bunch of young children having a great time, smiling, laughing, enjoying themselves. I saw parents being happy and joyous with one another, whether they were protesting for or against. We saw camaraderie there, and I think that if we can get past the big picture and we can get down into the individuals of these groups, there was a lot of joy yesterday. And that's certainly something that we got to focus on. That's something that we gotta bring back. How do we bring joy to one another, and certainly how do you bring joy to your own life? And so with that, guys, I appreciate you guys for coming in tonight. If you guys, I left the phone line up for a little bit. If you guys wanted to call in, you guys shouldn't be shy. But I want to appreciate you guys. Thank you guys so much for joining in. If you guys have never seen me before, make sure you guys hit the follow button, the subscribe button, hit the bell. We normally do this show 3 times a week, talking about politics, social issues around the world, and mostly around the country. Whether it's Trump, the wall, Congress, whatever it is, we'll more than likely cover it in some regards. But thank you guys for coming in tonight. I hope that I can speak. I hope that if you guys went to this event, that you guys gained something from it. That you guys maybe heard something from somebody else that you may have disagreed with. It's all about human growth. It's all about personal growth, and hopefully you guys will sit down and reflect on what people opposing you said, and be able to digest that a little bit. All right, I actually got a phone call. 1 second. Hey Matt, how's it going, man?
Excellent. How are you?
I'm doing well. I was just about to wrap up the show, but nonetheless, here you are. Welcome in. What's on your mind?
Thank you. Thank you. A real quick question. I wanted the perspective discussed on how that libertarians shouldn't really be arguing over legal plunder, because that's what pirates do. And the way I feel like that actually fits the scenario is this is a government-run facility that was funded via the theft of taxation.
Mm-hmm.
Yet one group wants to use it for this, one group doesn't want them. They're arguing about the legal plunder, or one way to look at it is they're being forced, they're being stolen from in order to provide for something that is, quote, for the common good. Why don't we just get back to individual rights?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And you know, that was one sign that was out there that was privatize the libraries, and this would solve everything. If the library is private, then it would be up to the owners of the library to decide on if it was going to be there or not. And if you didn't want to advocate for the library anymore, if you didn't want to patronize the library, then you don't patronize it. If you do like that event, you go to it, you can patronize the library can bring it back again. And certainly that while that argument wasn't very loud, because, you know, libertarians are only so loud, without being too annoying and not being able to be tolerated. But I think that was certainly a message that a lot more people needed to hear. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Jason, along the same lines, I know it's kind of a radical quote, but Gustave de Molinari, a philosopher from way back, but he really promoted property rights, and he said, private property is redundant, public property is an oxymoron. He said all property is either private or it's stolen. And I think that really goes back to all rights come from the individual. Now, the individual has property rights, but once you get into a collective, the collective really has no property rights.
True statement.
And if something is owned by everybody, it's in effect owned by nobody. And here we are arguing over, you know, who has the right to use something owned by nobody.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And for people who haven't gotten into this discussion a good example of this would be, look at your national parks. So the national parks is owned by quote unquote everybody, so therefore it's owned by nobody. So when somebody goes and litters, right, it's supposed to affect everybody, but it affects absolutely nobody. And this was certainly something that during the last big government shutdown, that libertarians said, look, this is our land, and went out there and tried to clean it up, and got shut down by the police force, which was kind of weird. But you know, that commonality means that nobody has it, right? You make a valid point.
The tragedy of the commons.
Yes.
Exactly. They call it the tragedy of the commons. I really appreciated your show. I'm going to let you go, but I enjoyed listening to it tonight.
Dude,
I appreciate everything you do.
I appreciate it, Matt, and I hope you have a good night, man.
All right, sure.
All right. Thank you for calling in, Matt. That was some great points from, you know, certainly I was not trying to get onto I wasn't going to take my own personal libertarian stuff. I wanted to be, while I did share some libertarian stuff, absolutely. I'm glad that Matt brought that up, because Matt's another one of the great libertarians of the upstate. He's a wealth of knowledge, and he brings up valid points. He brings up great points, and certainly privatizing the library would have been beneficial in the long run. Certainly, you can talk about the merits and the values that are brought to you by having a public library, but that doesn't always mean the best in every regard. So, with that, guys, I'm going to wrap up the show. I'm an old man. I got to get to bed. So I want to thank you guys all for coming in tonight. If you guys have never followed this show before, make sure you hit the follow, hit the subscribe, like the video, and I'll see you guys. The next time I'll be here is going to be on We're not going to be going live normally. Normally we would go Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern. But since I'm going live tonight, the next time I'll see you guys is going to be Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern. Hopefully you guys will tune in for that one as well. I will see you guys then. I am Mr. Murica, the Bearded Truth, Jason Lyon. Thank you guys all. Have a great night.